So as I just briefly mentioned, we have these three main ways where you can apply to us. So I would say the majority of our applicants are going to apply through the LSAT. As we mentioned, that's something that you can sign up for during the beginning of your process on LSAC. A little bit later, Jeff's going to talk about when you should take the LSAT and medians and scores and things like that. But just know that every applicant will have to have some form of a test to be able to be admitted to law school, whether that's the LSAT or the GRE. A lot of times we get questions from applicants such as, what if I have a master's and a PhD and 7 billion other degrees? You still have to take either the LSAT or the GRE to be admitted. The only exception to that rule is going to be our Aggie Direct program. And that's a very, very narrow exception because it only applies to a subset of students that are currently at or have graduated within a year from Texas A&M and College Station. And if you want more information about that program, I would say that I would direct you to our website. We have a page directly on the website about that, and it goes through all of the requirements that we're looking for, but then also it directs you to email Dean Cook in our office, because if you think you might qualify, you're still going to have to connect with us, provide all the information that we're looking for, and then we can let you know whether you would be eligible or not. A lot of other law schools around the country have similar programs with their undergraduate institutions. So if you happen to not be an Aggie, that is something that you can look at for your institution and for that connected law school. But for us, that's going to be just that subset of students. So the majority of our students are going to take the LSAT or the GRE. Again, really the only difference there is how you're going to submit your reportable exam. The LSAT is going to come to us through LSAC once you have taken it and you have completed your writing sample. LSAC will submit those scores directly to us and we will get them all at the same time. If you take the GRE, you're going to have to go to our website, look at our GRE code, and then submit it through ETS to our specific school. I will say that a lot of times applicants will pick the wrong code. They will submit a code for College Station, Texas A&M, and not the law school. We have our own specific code. And so I would invite you to make sure that you check that out on our website under the GRE section to make sure you send it to the right location. And then we'll be able to receive that directly from ETS. And we will then have to request that LSAC release your CAS, which is that group of documents that Jeff discussed earlier.
Natalia, I just want to spend a few seconds talking about how to choose between the LSAT and the GRE. I think this is something that, once again, for the students that are out there, we might need to have this conversation, or you might want to have this conversation with us one-on-one. But in general, I feel like the default of the time we're going to recommend students to take the LSAT. Kind of my number one reason for that is if you don't take the LSAT, you are automatically limiting yourself on what schools you can apply to. But Natalia, what are some situations that you might recommend someone taking the GRE or using the GRE for their law school admission test?
Sure, that's a great question, because one of the differences between the LSAT and the GRE is the content of the exam. So the LSAT focuses heavily on your reading, your writing, your comprehension, and your analytical and logical thinking skills. The GRE has a math portion that the LSAT does not have, and students sometimes aren't aware of that. So that's the first thing, is sort of content is a little bit different. Second, I would say that the amount of times it's offered is another difference. The LSAT is offered less frequently than the GRE. The GRE is offered much more frequently throughout the month. And so sometimes students will pick and say, oh, I can take the GRE really soon, and so I'm going to sign up for that. But regardless of how often they are offered, they are both very difficult exams. And so you should allocate the correct amount of time for studying for both of them. And so really when we're looking at why you should use the GRE, most of our students fall into two categories. One, they've already taken a GRE because they maybe got their master's, or they were thinking about getting their master's and they're trying to decide between a master's program and law school. And so maybe you want to just take one test and then apply to both types of schools and see where you can get in. And then the second group is going to be sometimes our non-traditional students that have been working and that generally have a background in like engineering or finance or things that lend themselves to doing really well on this type of exam. And so if you fit into those categories, the GRE might be a great option for you. If not, I would say, like Jeff said, the LSAT gives you more flexibility because all law schools accept the LSAT. Only some schools accept the GRE. And then the last thing that I will add about that is that if you have already taken the LSAT and you didn't do well, and you think, oh, I'm going to take the GRE instead and then utilize that score, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way, the way that it does in your undergrad experience where you could take, you know, the ACT and the SAT and then just submit your higher score. Because all law schools accept the LSAT, and that is the preferred and dominant exam that's used, we will receive through LSAC every LSAT exam that you take, every score that you've received. And so we will see that. And so even though you take the GRE and you want to be considered with the GRE, we will still have on file your LSAT score. And so that's just something that you have to consider before you make that decision to take the GRE.
Yeah, I like to tell students that you need to pick which one of these pathways you're going to choose and stick with it. And that even applies to Aggie Direct. If you're an undergrad A&M student and want to apply through the Aggie Direct method, if you go out and take an LSAT, you then will not be eligible necessarily for the Aggie Direct program. So picking now, early on in the cycle, now being relative to when you're watching this, but picking before you start the application process, what pathway you're going to pursue, not just for A&M, but for whatever law school you're going to apply for, is important as you make those decisions and choices.